going to go through all of their many numerous achievements, but the Shibutanis were 2-time Olympians, 3-time world champions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, as well as the authors, the recently released book, Amazing, Asian American and Pacific Islanders, who inspires us all, as well as the Kudo Kid series prior to that. We also have Chuck Aoki, again, not going to go through all of his potential achievements and future ones. Also a 3-time Olympian and world champion, and also preparing for the 2024 Paris Olympic Games, and the team captain, I think, is what I heard, and is currently working for the University of Michigan as a disability navigator. So, again, thank you all for coming this afternoon. We welcome you and them to the Ann Arbor District Library.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that introduction. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This is going to be great. We appreciate you spending your time with us on the weekend.
Especially when the weather's nice, too, right? You're choosing to be here with all of us.
Yeah, don't make them have second thoughts. We need to keep them here.
Can you hear us okay? Are our mics on?
They are.
Yeah?
They
okay.
are? Okay, good. Great. Okay. So, again, thank you, Steve, for having us. Thank you to Literati, an amazing bookstore. Who's been to Literati? Yeah, it's great. We love Literati. And we're here to talk about our new children's picture book. It's called Amazing, Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders Who Inspire Us All. I guess before we get into the book, we have some people coming in. Yay, more people. Everyone wave. Welcome them. Hi, thanks for coming. Don't be embarrassed. So before we get into the book, actually, so the reason, why Ann Arbor, Maya and I lived in Ann Arbor for 11 years. We first came here in 2007 as we were moving up the ranks in figure skating and ice dance specifically, and trained in nearby Canton, Michigan, in preparation for the 2014 and 2018 Olympic Games. And now we're in Los Angeles, but we come back to Ann Arbor very frequently, and it's really special to be here.
And why Ann Arbor? Part of it, too, is we've been touring since the beginning of April. The book officially came out on April 18th, but we knew that we wanted to come here, not just because of Literati, but then also because of Chuck, who is our conversation guest today, which is super exciting for Alex and myself, just because we've been doing a bunch of book stops, and it's just been the two of us. So to have a friend here as well, and someone who's featured in the book, will be very special.
Yes, Chuck is in the book. And so if you open the book, you'll be able to find him and read a little bit about him. But what's so amazing about having Chuck here today is all of the exciting things that he's accomplished, what he's working on right now, and we'll be able to learn more about wheelchair rugby and how we can support and follow him on his journey in the lead up to the 2024 Paralympics in Paris. But yeah, so who here has read a children's picture book before? That's good. Phew. It was going to be awkward if there weren't as many hands raised. But so the reason why Maya and I wanted to create this book, it's actually our third book. The first two were part of a middle grade chapter book series called Kudo Kids. And that is a story about two siblings who are Japanese American. Their names are Mika and Andy. So
kind of similar to Maya and Alex, but not quite, right? 2
4-letter first names. But we wanted to figure skating and ice dance and the way that we approached it required a lot of creativity. At baseline, because figure skating is a storytelling sport, it's equal parts athleticism and artistry, but specifically because of what we were to realize, how unique we were in the sport of ice dance, being Asian American, also being siblings, and that factoring into the types of music that we could skate to and the types of stories and choreography that we could do. And so, some might say that those are restrictions or limitations, but I think they created opportunities for us to learn about different things and also be very aware of representation and visibility and what that means and the pressures that are associated with it, but also the opportunities that exist for us to connect with people. And so
I liked when you were asking questions. So can you raise your hand if you're a fan of figure skating?
Yeah, it's good to know the audience.
Phew.
Yeah. What about wheelchair rugby?
I'll change. Yeah.
Okay.
More hands up by the end of
today.
There'll be more hands up by the end
After
of it.
today, we'll have a bunch of wheelchair rugby super fans. But yeah, so we wanted to get into books because of the storytelling component, that tie-in. Maya and I have a lot of shared experience. We grew up reading the same books. You're all cousins, right? And so do you all read the same books? When you read a good book, do you share it with each other? And you're like, hey, I read this. You should check it out. Yeah. So, I mean, we just shared books. There was one book, and we read it together. And we just didn't grow up reading books like this one. There is not enough representation still in children's picture books, in children's literature. And so, while we definitely had our role models and our inspiration that we saw on television in figure skating and other sports, we never had the opportunity, and many people from the Asian American and Pacific Islander communities have not had the opportunity to see a book where they could learn about people from their community who came before them and people who exist now. So we're so excited that this book is here so that the next generation can have that education, that awareness, and that empathy, hopefully, that comes from learning about, just from learning. And there are still gaps in our education system. If you go to school in the United States, you don't necessarily learn very much about. I remember year by year learning a lot about the American Revolution, the Revolutionary War and the 13 colonies, and I was like, wait, I learned about this 5 years ago, and we're learning about it again, but just maybe with a little bit more detail. And that's great, and that's important. But Asian American and Pacific Islander history is American history as well. And so we wanted to be able to compile that thoughtfully in a book highlighting, and there are 36 figures in here. And for many people, I think it's an introduction. Despite the accomplishments of these individuals, Chuck included, they aren't celebrated enough. They are not visible enough. And so that was the intention behind us wanting to do this book.
And Alex and I are great teammates. We work well together on the ice, but then specifically we were able to rely on our communication and our ability to work with collaborators for this project specifically, because it is so important to get it right when it's nonfiction. We're telling real stories, and this is oftentimes the first introduction that many people have to these incredible people. And so, for example, there are 36 figures highlighted. We knew of 22. But that's why it was so exciting for us to be able to do the research. And we often get asked, why 36? There's no ranking within the pages, and 36 truly comes from the format.
Even though Chuck knows he's my favorite.
Yeah. There's no ranking, but it's 36 because within the format of a children's picture book, we want to make sure that everyone had enough space for their illustration and their text. That was more important to us than coming up with a book of 50 or 100 figures, even though there are certainly so many more people who deserve to be uplifted in that way.
And do you know how books get made? Do you know? It takes so many people working together. It's like a team, and you have your editor who is kind of like the captain of the team, and then you have your authors who work on figuring out the words that are going to be in the book. And for children's picture books, you have an illustrator.
We definitely didn't do the illustrations.
Yes.
No one would want that.
Maybe someone would, but I think we went with a very talented illustrator. And so there's a lot of collaboration. There's a lot of teamwork. And so our collaborators on this book project, it was important to us to work with people from the community that the book is talking about. And so that being a very intentional process that we went through as well. And unfortunately in publishing, publishing is the industry or the profession of writing and creating books. I feel like I'm speaking to like two completely separate audiences, so excuse the simplicity sometimes. But there is not a lot of representation in publishing, which definitely impacts the types of books that we see across all genres, across all levels. And so there's definitely been a lot of progress.
And something that you'll notice when you check out the book is that there's a good mix of historic figures and then also contemporary people who are still achieving amazing things like Chuck. And that was important to us because, as Alex mentioned earlier, there's certainly been a gap in our awareness and education, unfortunately, just what stories have been accessible and what has been deemed important enough to be highlighted in books and news and various types of media. And so it's been incredible to see the reaction. And while our background is sports, it was also important to us that we not just highlight athletes. There are 7. within the book, but then we also wanted to show that there have been a wide variety of things accomplished from people who are a part of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community.
And we want to show the next generation, kids of all backgrounds from around the world, because this book isn't just intended for Americans or people in North America, that anything is possible. And so we want to portray a wide array of professions and not emphasizing one being more important over the other. So that took a lot of collaboration with our editor to kind of lay the groundwork for how we ordered each of the people and who they were next to within the pages of the book.
We've been working on this for over 2 years, so it's very exciting that it's out now, and I think it's time to turn to our very special guest.
Yes. Chuck, how many figures in the book did you know about?
I knew probably, well, there was one I knew pretty well, pretty intimately. That was The Rock. No, I'm just kidding. So I knew probably, I don't know, half, a little more than half. But I certainly, like they were saying, there's some people I had never heard of or had not even, I'd heard the name before, but it was like, oh, I didn't realize this is what that person did or this is what that person did. So it, when Maya and Alex told me that I was going to be in this book, it was pretty overwhelming, honestly. The idea for me is, I still consider myself so lucky that what I've gotten to do in my entire life has been just a joy and hard to believe sometimes. And then to be, alongside these incredible people who've achieved so much in their life, it's a humbling thing to feel. And I have to really thank them for not only having me today, but including me as part of it. And, very similar to their experience growing up, I didn't read books with people who looked like me, not only Asian American, but also with a disability. And, right on the cover is this woman, I want to talk about her very briefly, is Alice Wong, who's a longtime disability advocate who's really incredible. And, it's like, not only am I not the only Asian person in this book, but I'm also not the only Asian person with a disability in this book, which is just so cool. And I think really speaks to the way in which you two have so thoughtfully constructed this list of people who are, have this underlying similarity of being Asian American Pacific Islander, but also other identities that go along with that and people who've achieved so much. So it's really, really incredible. Wow, that was a long way to answer your question about how many people I knew.
And you did it so amazingly, but because you are amazing. We actually haven't known each other for very long. Despite being Team USA athletes, there isn't often a lot of intersection with Olympians and Paralympians because we're, other than competing in different sports and traveling around the world and always training, there aren't as many opportunities to connect. But we actually met very briefly for the first time at Universal Studios.
That's right.
Right?
That's right. Yep.
We were waiting for magic wands at Ollivanders. And I was like, Maya, that's Chuck Aoki. And we've long admired, even though we didn't know Chuck personally, we've long admired him. Obviously, we both share being Japanese Americans, but he's always been such a thoughtful and obviously, separate from his achievements in his sport, just a very thoughtful, I've watched your interviews, or had watched your interviews, and really admired the way that you represent our country and the way that you're an advocate for all of the various communities that you are a part of.
And something that I think is interesting too is not only do we not have that crossover, but also winter and summer. And so
Yes,
that's
that's
even
right.
more reason for us to not necessarily have the chance to intersect. But I think what's special is that this isn't the only event we're doing together. Actually, in about a week, we'll be doing an event together in Los Angeles. But I think you start to notice that within the Team USA community, you start to see a lot of the same faces because there are people who believe in the importance of not just representing through their sport, but then also who they are and the communities that they fully represent.
Yeah, without getting too into it, I think there are levels to everything. And the demands of being an athlete and all of the work that goes into that, it is a full-time job, but many athletes, like Chuck, also has a job. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that and how you balance sort of the demands of your training? How do you separate and choose how you allocate your time, because it is limited?
And not to make this a two-part question, but I'm also curious about how you found wheelchair rugby, how long you've been doing it, and since we were going to have a whole room full of wheelchair rugby fans, explaining some about the sport.
Yeah, let's start there, actually.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Wow, well, that was so many nice things you guys said about me. First of all, and yeah, we were literally in Universal Studios in Ollivanders, and the Shibutanis came walking up to me, going, "Which wand are you getting?" And I was like, "Oh my God, I've seen you on TV." So it was pretty cool moment for me there. Yeah, so my very brief backstory. I'm originally from Minnesota, bounced around the country, landed here in Michigan. Super happy to be here, and I grew up with my disability, and so my parents were like, "Hey, you're active, you're rambunctious, you're still going to play sports. Doesn't matter, you're in a wheelchair. We're going to find something for you to do." And so I started off playing a sport called wheelchair basketball, which I loved, fell in love with, a lot of fun. And then when I was 15 years old, I saw a movie called Murder Ball. It's a documentary on Netflix. Yeah, it's very good documentary. It's on all Delta flights. I've watched it a few times. It's a documentary of the 2004 Paralympic team. And so I saw this sport where people were crashing into each other, knocking each other around, seeing each other flying. And I was a 15-year-old boy at the time, and I said, "Well, that looks awesome. Like, I want to do that sport." My mom was like, "Well, you're in the hospital a lot already and injured." I was like, "No, I want to try." She said, "Okay, fine, sounds good." Showed up to a practice, got absolutely beat up, crashed into walls, flipped over, sent flying, and I fell in love with it just instantly. And so that was when I was, like I said, about 15, 16 years old. Started playing immediately. Again, fell in love with the sport. Was able to make my first national team my senior year of high school, and it's really been a meteoric, unbelievable ride ever since. I went to the London Games, the Rio Games, the Tokyo Games, and hopefully going to the Paris Games next year as well. I've been honored to be the team captain of several years, including this year.
Just announced.
Yeah, just
this
announced.
Year too.
Yep, this year with my team, which is such a privilege to lead so many incredible athletes across the country. And yeah, it's a lot of fun sport. I encourage everyone to check it out. We will have a team here at the University of Michigan starting next year, actually, which is super exciting, that I'll be part of. It'll be a community member team mostly, and so we'll be playing that. So we'll encourage you all to check it out. But very briefly, it's played 4-on-4 on a basketball court. We have a ball. We try to cross the goal line to score with it, and from there it's full contact. There are a few rules. You're not allowed to literally hit someone in the face with your hand or anything, but the chairs, you can crash into each other, send each other flying. It's a very spectator-friendly sport, I like to say. So we'll encourage you all to check it out. And but before we go, I'll make sure to let you all know where you can follow and check it all out. Alex, I forgot your first question because I got so excited talking about wheelchair rugby.
I forgot my first question because I was so excited to hear more about wheelchair rugby.
Balancing things and what I do here. Actually,
what you're
perfect.
doing now.
Yeah, it's a perfect intersection. So what landed me in Ann Arbor was first, my wife actually got into graduate school at the School of Social Work. So she is going to school there, working there. And so she was like, "You want to move to Ann Arbor?" I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm with you. I kind of have to, right?" No, but so we decided to move here. And when I got here, I found out from this guy, Dr. Okanlami, who some folks may or may not have heard of, who works at the University of Michigan. I see a couple heads nodding. Messaged me and said, "Hey, I've got this really cool opportunity coming along to work on a grant we have from the Craig H. Nielsen Foundation, which is a spinal cord injury group." Said, "Would you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, I'd love to check it out." So I applied for it, got it. And so I run a grant program that's called Prescription to Play. And so basically my job is to get people with spinal cord injuries, and really all people with disabilities, just spinal cord injuries, who the group is from, involved in adaptive sports. So we run clinics, we do demonstrations, we bring equipment to people, we go to rehab centers, and basically just talk to people about the importance of physical activity and the sports you can play, because a lot of folks, when they suffer a traumatic spinal cord injury, think that their athletic career is over. They think they're never going to be active, they can't bike, they can't play basketball. And the answer is you can do all that. It looks a little bit differently than it used to, but you can absolutely be active. And so my job is to educate people about that, and like I said, literally bring the equipment to them in a lot of cases. And then this flip side of it, the reason we call it Prescription to Play, and our other job is to educate the medical community about this as well. Dr. O, as we call him, was a orthopedic surgery resident when he sustained a spinal cord injury, and then he gets injured and finds out about adapted sports and goes, "Oh my gosh, I could have been doing this my whole career. I've been telling people, why haven't I known about this?" And so one of his passions has become to bring it to the medical community. So we also host events for doctors, for residents, for medical students to come and try adaptive sports as well, so that when they have patients with disabilities come through their door, they can say, "Hey, you can be active. You can play basketball. You can play tennis. You can play rugby with Chuck." And so, yeah, it's a really, really fun job.
He won't hit you that hard.
Yeah, I'll take it easy on you to start at least. And so it's a really amazing job to, adapted sports has brought me places I never dreamed of being. It's brought me all over the world, met the president, has been amazing, this book. And so to be able to give that gift to other people is really, really a blessing in a lot of ways, and something I'm so amazed to get to do, so passionate about. And yeah, so that's what's landed me here in Ann Arbor in front of you all today.
If you haven't noticed, Chuck is very humble. He like breezes through things. That's like, oh yes, and I got the grant, and I got the job. He also, a little bit of background. Have you watched the opening ceremony before at the Olympics or the Paralympics on TV? All of the athletes march, or they walk out, or they roll out, and they have all the flags, and it's like the beginning. It's a big celebration. It's a big party. Chuck, you want to tell them what you had the honor of doing? And actually, you were selected.
I was, yeah. So for the Tokyo, so Alex is referencing the opening ceremony, and so the way in which they decide who's going to carry the flag out for each country is each country has its own way of doing it. The way the U.S. does is we vote on it. All the athletes who are there vote on it. And at the Tokyo Games, the most recent ones, I had the privilege, along with Melissa Stockwell, because there's a male and female flag bearer for every country. I had the privilege of being elected by my fellow athletes to lead us out with the flag and to be the flag bearer, which was just, an amazing, incredible honor to be the very first one in the front of the line. It was, again, just an overwhelming experience to think that I was a kid with a disability who didn't know what I was going to do in my life, and I thought that I was never going to be active. I couldn't play sports with my friends. I thought I was just going to be sad my whole life, and there I was in front of, unfortunately, an empty stadium because I was still in 2021, but to lead out the entire Team USA delegation with so many amazing athletes who've accomplished so much in their lives, and for them to have selected me to lead them out was a really, really special experience. And yeah, it was something that as Alex has alluded to, I don't like to talk about myself that much. I'd rather talk about the things I help people bring to, but yeah, it was a very, very special thing to get to do.
That's like being elected the class president of, the Paralympics for the United States. That's an incredible honor, and I think it speaks to what an amazing ambassador he is and human connector that Chuck is. And so one of the honest reasons why we wanted to put Chuck in the book, as opposed to, we've gotten this question quite a bit because we're figure skaters. Have you ever watched figure skating before? Have you ever heard of an athlete named Christy Yamaguchi or Michelle Kwan or Nathan Chen? These are all incredible figure skaters, and they're all amazing. But figure skating gets a lot of attention during the Olympic Games, a lot of visibility. Michelle Kwan had her own computer game that Maya
played the computer game. Yeah.
And, Christy Yamaguchi has so many books. She writes her own books, and we definitely recommend that you check those out. Nathan Chen writes books, too. There are more opportunities at the present for certain athletes in certain sports, and I think broadly speaking in the Olympics versus the Paralympics. And that is a quality that Maya and I are striving to promote. And so we hope, and we are going to work very hard to try and make sure that more people know about Chuck. And that's why it was important that we put him in the book, as opposed to people who have already received maybe not enough recognition for what they've accomplished, but more within the sort of context of our community and how we're perceived. And
I think something that's interesting, too, through the process of writing this book, Alex and I learned more about Team USA history. You should mention that story, because I think that really motivated us to do more research.
Yes. So the first Asian American woman and man to win Olympic gold medals. Does anyone, maybe you've taken a look at the book, so this isn't necessarily a fair question, but what decade do you think that occurred in? This is in school. You can just shout it out if you want to. Any guesses? 1970s, 1980s. Any guesses? 1980. So not a bad guess. And the reality is that when we do ask people how many figures they know of or knew about before reading the book, there is and should not be any shame in how many you did or didn't know. Because we're all on this journey that is lifelong, that is learning. And especially for those of us that come from different cultural, ethnic backgrounds, that is a very unique and specific journey that we are on based on our family, where we grow up, what generation we are, and we all have something really beautiful and incredible to share, and it starts with talking about it and having books like these that we can, start discussions around. The answer is 1948. The first gold medal won by an Asian American woman or man and man was in 1948 at the London Olympic Games, and they were won by Victoria Manalo-Draves and Dr. Sammy Lee. And he wasn't a doctor before he won the gold medal, but he went on to be a doctor and a coach. Vicky, as she was called by her friends, was Filipino American, and Sammy was Korean American. And so during the 40s, if we sort of recall all of the American history that we read, that was a time where segregation was still very prevalent. And so Sammy was not allowed to swim or practice his dives in the pool when other people were there. And so he had to practice before it was being drained. And when there was no availability to the pool, he practiced diving into sand pits. And that information that we learned in the process of doing this book was pretty startling to us, because Maya and I have been fans of the Olympics and the Paralympics for a long time, and as active participants in the world of sports and Team USA, we had just never heard their names mentioned. And we wondered why that was the case, and it definitely inspired all of the work and effort that went into creating this book, because while they are certainly celebrated in their communities, Sammy, being from Los Angeles and being a key figure in the UCLA community, does not have more attention. There haven't been biopics or movies or documentaries that have the wide reach of their stories. And so that being kind of a moment that honestly made me a little bit angry, because I think that if I had known more about their stories and the obvious challenges that they had to overcome in a much more, I think, things are relative, but a challenging era to exist as an Asian American person, it would have made me feel some sense of solidarity is one word for it, but like a little less alone. And that is like the power of representation and learning about other people, regardless of whether they are from your community or not. Because it can be a very lonely journey, and that's why it's great to be a part of a team and to be able to reach across to people in different sports and different communities, to be able to form these meaningful friendships and relationships that carry on for years and years and years.
And so beyond what you mentioned, what you do at the university, you're also extremely busy. So we're all very fortunate that Chuck is here with us today. Can you explain a little bit where you are and what the journey to Paris looks like?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, what's your schedule? What time do you wake up in the morning?
Wow. So, I just real quick, I just want to echo what Alex was just saying about these characters and this history. I think my, one really cool exploration I've had after reading the book and really over the last few years of being Asian has been interesting for me refinding that identity, because, my dad grew up in the 60s, 70s, when Asian American discrimination, while not legal, was still very much, it happened a lot, and he really was ashamed of being Asian. He was bullied a lot in school for it. And so it was something we kind of lost, unfortunately, growing up, because there was an identity he had just sort of, I don't want to say let go, because you can never totally lose an identity, but it's something he had just sort of set aside. This isn't something I'm going to really talk about, because it's just only brought me negative things, unfortunately. So it's been really amazing to get to sort of refine that and investigate. And I think this book has really given me a chance to get to explore it again. So I just want to say that real quick. To my schedule, yeah, it's I like to say it's a marathon and a sprint in a lot of ways. We have the games are in.
You're not supposed to sprint a marathon,
Yeah.
but somehow Chuck does it.
Yeah, the games are in August of next year, which is 15 months away, which seems like a very, very long time. But a year from now, I'll blink and I'll be like, oh my God, a year ago, I was at the Ann Arbor District Library with the Shibutanis and all of you wonderful folks. And now I'm here, And so we have the national team. We are all over the country. I'm the only one who lives in Michigan. We have folks who live in Chicago, Phoenix, Birmingham, Alabama, where else? Texas, California, all over the country, essentially. And so we have to get together to train, because I do most of my training by myself. You may have seen me around Gallup Park or over on Eisenhower or...
Now they will.
Yeah, exactly.
Everyone wave to Chuck
Yeah.
and
Please
cheer
do.
him
Say
on
hello.
if you see him working out doing
Say
his
hello.
Rocky workout.
I'd love that. And I work out all over on campus, too, in a lot of different places. So training, 5 or 6 days a week myself, but then we have training camps once a month. So I fly to Birmingham, Alabama, of all places, to train with the entire national team. So I was there for about 10 days earlier this month. I'll go there for another week at the end of June, go there in July, go there in August, go to September, et cetera, et cetera. All the way up to our qualification tournament, the Pan American Games, which will be held in Santiago, Chile later this year over Thanksgiving. So you'll have to all watch us compete in Santiago.
Yeah, where can we watch? Where can we...
I don't know where it'll be now. There's almost always live streams. You can always follow me and our team on social media.
He's a very worthwhile follow on social media because he contains
Not one-dimensional,
multitudes.
Chuck. Yeah.
Chuck is not. You're not going to follow Chuck and be like, I respect wheelchair rugby, but this is a lot of wheelchair rugby. You're going to get beverages. You're going to get really thoughtful commentary on being disabled and the challenges and awareness that I've definitely learned a lot from your perspective. And yeah, so give Chuck a follow on social. He's really great. But sorry, I interrupted.
No, you're fine. So yeah, you just have to follow us along. That's easy. There's always it's 2023. There's always streaming and stuff like that. So we'd be happy to have you follow along there. But yeah, so we'll do that the rest of the year. That's my life. I'll take about 3 weeks off in December, then get right back to it because it'll be about 8 months until the Paralympic Games kick off in Paris of next year. So it's like I said, it's both a marathon and a sprint. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of hard work. Like I said, I'll be in LA with them next week to do another event like this. I'm going to Korea later this month as part of the International Paralympic Committee's Athlete Council, where essentially athletes from the entire world get together and meet to talk about issues and sort of what we'd like to see get better, what's going well. And I'm really privileged to be the U.S.'s representative at that event, which will be a great chance to sort of connect with, like I said, people with disabilities from all over the country, because the U.S., we have a very particular system and the way things work, and we can learn a lot from the way the Canadians and the Germans and the Chinese and the Japanese do it. So it's very, very exciting to get to do that. But yeah, my schedule is busy, but it's the way I like it. Of course, I also have a wife who we just got married in December of last year. So, trying to spend time with her at home, and also my two, I don't have human children, but I have two canine children who I take care of, Winnie and Ellie, who are probably missing me very much right now. I should have brought them, but maybe next time.
Next time. I think one of my hopes is, while we don't live in Ann Arbor, we're really excited to have this type of event here because, when you watch the Olympics and the Paralympics, everyone likes being on TV. It's cool, right? Wouldn't it be cool if there was an epic watch party in Ann Arbor, Michigan for Chuck during the Paris 2024 Games that was filled with people from our Ann Arbor community? Because, the other thing that I want to do with this is Chuck is new to Ann Arbor. And so when we met up, we went to Tomakun, and I remember going to Tomakun like the first day that it opened, being like super excited. That's how old I am. It's been around for a while. But yeah, so if you have any recommendations for things that Chuck should do or see in Ann Arbor, he's new in town, but he's just a tremendous icon and representative of our community and a great guy. I guess, do you want to open it up to questions? Sure. If there are any questions?
With me, yeah.
Do you have questions for Chuck? No?
You can ask the Shibutani's questions too. You don't have to ask me questions.
What about, I have a question for you.
Please.
What is one thing that you wish more people knew about the Paralympics? How many people have watched the Paralympics? Okay.
Not bad.
Then it's a
not
good question.
That's not bad. No, and again, kind of like Alex said, there's no shame in not knowing these books. There's no shame in not having watched the Paralympics. It has been very difficult to be able to watch. So to answer your question, aside from just more people knowing about the Paralympics, which would be my first thing, I think the second part that I would love people to understand is that, the Paralympics are, the Olympics, essentially for people with disabilities. So everyone has different function levels. And so what that means is that we get very used to elite athletes looking like LeBron James, Michael Phelps, the Shibutanis, and things like. We get very used to elite athletes looking a particular way, but when you watch the Paralympics and you see the Paralympics, it's not going to look that same way. It's going to look very different. You have people who are visually impaired, who are completely blind. You have people who are missing most of their arms and legs. You have people who have cervical spinal cord injuries and can only move their arms. They can't move any other rest of their body or their head, I guess. But so to you, that's going to look, that looks kind of odd. That person's not swimming very fast or not running very fast. This doesn't feel like elite athletics. But everyone at the Paralympic Games is an elite athlete. They're the absolute best at what they do within their function level. and what they're able to achieve, sort of in spite their limitations, is really quite incredible. It's challenging to be a person with disability in society. And so what I would love for everyone to know is that everyone you're seeing there is an elite athlete, works just as hard as Michael Phelps or whoever, but it just looks different. Different doesn't mean less. It just means different. And so I think that's the one thing that I would love folks to take away from and understand about the Paralympics.
Yeah, and I think an important reason why people like Alice Wong, who Chuck mentioned at the beginning, and Tammy Duckworth, who's a senator, who is an amputee, there's a deeper conversation to be had about intersectionality and the visibility within even the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, and the types of visibility that we give people who are different. And so difference really should not be something that is pointed out. Of course, it can be acknowledged, but we should celebrate differences, and then we should have the conversations so that we can come together as communities and people and talk about them.
Question.
Oh yeah. How long do you practice?
First, what's your name?
Oh, my name is Janet.
Hi.
Hi, Jenna.
Thanks for being here.
Okay. How long do you practice daily?
So I guess you guys can talk about how long you did practice.
Sure.
Or maybe you still do. I don't know. I shouldn't assume. Anyway, so I train usually when I'm at training camps. We usually are in the gym and on court for about anywhere between 6 and 7 hours a day in our chairs, knocking each other around, smashing. When I'm back here in Ann Arbor, anywhere from two to 4 hours. Kind of depends. Some days are heavier, some days are lighter. Kind of a mix and balance of things. So it's a good amount of time. But definitely, to Alex's point, it's a full-time job.
That's very similar to us when we were training for the 2018 games. On light days, once we already had our choreography, I'd say it was maybe 4 or 5 hours. But then when we were working on developing our program, sometimes we had maybe, 10 to 12-hour days, which sounds crazy, but we weren't moving the whole time. There was a lot of thinking and creativity that had to happen.
It's kind of like writing. Is anyone familiar with writer's block? You need to have the computer open or the pen in your hand to go through the process of failure to write. Same thing with creativity in any other space and skill development in any other space. You need to have skates on and be on the ice, even if it doesn't feel like you are accomplishing something, when in reality you really are. Just by being there, it might not feel like progress, but all of the sort of frustration does yield breakthroughs that amount to the final product that you see when you watch us perform.
Great question.
Hi, I'm Anne.
Hi, Anne.
I'm so excited about your book, and I'm excited to give it to every kid I know. So I was wondering about your research process. Did you do most of your research like with books and online, or did you get to meet and interview any of these people? So,
a great question. The process can probably be broken up into several periods of time. Because there aren't very many books like this, and there haven't been, and we don't own a printing press, and we are not a publisher, we needed to pitch the book first. And in preparing a pitch, we needed to have or show, in our opinion, undeniable proof that there were enough people that are from our community that would be worthy of being included in a book like this, which of course there are, but you need to convince people because there haven't been books like this. And of course, the investment that goes into and all of the work and all of the people that are in design, that are in marketing, in the publishing industry, it is an investment on their part, and they need to believe that it can be successful, and one, that there's an audience for it, and two, that, well, I guess, they're concerned with making money. They want to make sure that there is an audience for it.
And something about when you asked the question, you said that you'd be gifting it. That means so much to us, just because when we were trying to pitch this project, like with many things, publishers or different industries look at metrics for what's been successful in the past, and it's kind of which one happens first, especially when there hasn't
chicken
been,
or the egg. It's
when
like,
there haven't been books like this. How do you show that it's worth it?
Yeah. And Chuck and Maya and me have the experience of being athletes in our respective sports, and when there hasn't been someone like you your appearance, your ability. How do you move forward? How do you find success? And it is belief. And so we were able to find an editor who believed in this book, and she was a really great captain in terms of helping guide the process. But Maya and I did a lot of research, probably a list of hundreds of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. And Maya and I are not Pacific Islanders. We're Asian American, and it's important to note that those are two distinct communities that have just happened to be combined by the US government for census purposes, for categorization. And so wanting to be mindful in terms of having this month, Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, of raising awareness, because I think in a lot of the spaces that we exist in now, people will talk about AAPI issues, but then casually only mention Asian Americans in the rest of their conversation. It's like, oh, we're here to celebrate Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month, and as Asian Americans, we all know, and that is exclusionary, and I don't think intentional, but still something that we realize. And so there are some books that highlight Asian Americans, but I think that the selection of the figures that they highlight tend to be very East Asian focused, when Asian American diaspora encompasses so many different regions of Asia, as well as bicultural, multiracial Asians, and that community, and what being Asian American and or Pacific Islander looks like is very different. I'm sorry, I went on kind of a tangent. But so there was this initial research process where we wanted to be as inclusive as possible. And then, of course, you join up with teammates and an editor and professionals who are in the book industry, who then bring their thoughts to the table. And we, in looking for a co-author to help us with this process, we were able to find Dane Liu, who actually has a journalism background. And so that was really important to us, because you just want to check your work multiple times. And so certainly using the internet as a resource, using books as a resource, hard to find documentaries on some of these athletes and some of these figures that, again, just haven't had the visibility.
But then when it comes to suggested after reading this book, if you're curious, the hope is that yes, it's a children's picture book, but we believe that people of all ages can really learn from it. But then that your curiosity is piqued and that you continue to do research. So, for example, a great book is Asian American Dreams by Helen Zia. And then also...
She's in the book as well.
She's in the book. But then there's also a PBS documentary series that I highly recommend. Those are two good places to start.
And that being said, they are Asian American focused, not Pacific Islander as well. And I think it's just our perspective as Olympians, and being mindful that Team USA is Olympics and Paralympics. And so that's one of the reasons why our book is Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders. Being a thoughtful ally, listening, and, we didn't have the opportunity to interview anyone beforehand. But that's why this process has been so gratifying with the book being out, where so many of the figures that are still with us today have been so excited to see themselves in the book, and that's people, Chuck's favorite, The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, who is Black Samoan, of Samoan descent, Carissa Moore, who is another Team USA athlete. She was the first woman to win an Olympic gold medal in surfing, and she won that at the Tokyo 2020-21 Games. Alice Wong also reached out. Her, a fantastic, incredibly prolific musician who is, every time I turn on the TV now, she's in another commercial. She's producing a Broadway show. And so just we've also felt really good because we made these selections 3 years ago. And in the back of your mind, you're like, oh, I hope no one screws up in between now and when the book is released. And so not knowing any of these people individually, feeling very good about our selection process, because we were definitely thoughtful, just like Chuck, and how he is an incredible athlete, but the dimensionality that he has as a person and the way that he conducts himself. We wanted to showcase good role models for the next generation of our community, and this book is certainly not the be-all and end-all. It's only 36, and the reason Maya mentioned briefly, it's because children's picture books have 32 pages. And so being mindful of not wanting Chuck to be in the upper left-hand corner and just like, is that Chuck? I think that's Chuck. It's just so small I can't tell. And, not wanting the text to simply be Chuck Aoki, smash, crash.
That
and-
says it all, though, right there.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of does. But yeah, that's, I guess, the long answer.
Hi, I'm Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. I was just wondering, what were some challenges you personally faced as Asian American athletes?
Oh, sure. So, I think one of the challenges for me in a lot of ways is, again, honestly, it was an identity that I hadn't really explored much until the lead up until the 2021 game, or 2020 games, I should say, which were being held in Tokyo, of course, and I'm Japanese American. And so I had reporters coming to me and saying, wow, you must be so excited to go to Japan and be there. And it's like, oh, well, first of all, I'm from America and I live in America, so it's like, yeah, I'm excited to go to Japan. It's a cool place. But it wasn't really something that I had explored much with my own identity, again, kind of as I mentioned, historically. And so I think, I'm lucky that I've always had a very supportive group of family and teammates, and the sport I'm in is pretty supportive generally. But I think that was a moment where I really had to sort of, revisit my identity and kind of understand what it meant to be Asian within the context, especially, as we looked so before 2020, it was sort of like, okay, this is something that's cool, I probably am. But then, 2020 came around and there was so much, anti-Asian rhetoric and violence going on. And I was seeing these images of, older looking Asian men getting attacked. It's like, well, that could be my dad. Like, that looked just like my father. And so having to sort of grapple with identity, this is an identity that, for thankfully most of my life, is one that has been pretty positive or at least neutral, and suddenly is being seen as a negative thing, was really a challenge for me. Obviously there was a lot going on in the year 2020. I'm certainly not saying this was the biggest challenge in the world, but for me it was like, wow, this is something I now have to sort of grapple with, understand the history behind it and the context and how I appear in different spaces. And so it's a long way to say that it's like it's been a more recent thing for me to kind of grapple with and challenge with, but it's been at the end of the day, it's been a very gratifying process to spend more time with and to learn more about.
Yeah.
I think for us, it's a bit of a complicated answer. We are so fortunate that we've always had each other to be community. We have moved quite a bit to pursue skating, but then realizing over time that ice dance in particular has a lot of history based in Europe. And while I had Christian Yamaguchi and Michelle Kwan to look up to, Alex didn't have that same type of representation and visibility, where when we became national champions, he was the first Asian American man to become national champion. Or when we were inducted into the Hall of Fame, same thing. And so I think it taught us to think differently when it comes to where we find inspiration.
And
right?
those accomplishments on the surface are like, wow, the first, that's positive, that's great. But then you think about the systemic issues that may have prevented other people from A, getting introduced to the sport, B, people with talent who worked hard who may have not been able to reach the levels of success that I am fortunate to have reached because of Maia and other reasons. But, when there is not enough representation and visibility, and our experience in ice dance being rather unique, again, all of the medalists at the Olympic Games in our sport, in our discipline of figure skating, have been white. And so beyond just being the first Asian or Asian Americans, we are the first non-white team to medal. And in a sport that is so subjective and based on culture and storytelling, there's definitely
bias
a
and
bias
preconceived notions
that the sport is not particularly good at addressing, because as I've kind of articulated over the course of the past month to different audiences and groups, the only skater or team that feels like they were fairly judged in a figure skating competition is the winner. And everyone else feels like they were misunderstood or not given enough points, or there was some wrongdoing. And so then being in a climate like that, and also being one of the only, if not the only, Asian or non-white team that has to deal with a completely different set of issues and challenges that people are, A, not aware of, B, there isn't the education globally or in this country to provide the historical context or compassion and empathy to people who have different experiences. It's difficult to speak to those challenges. And fortunately, again, we had each other, but even sometimes coaches, judges, friends, peers, we would voice our concerns, and it would be
Dismissed.
And so we've been very intentional about, one, writing books that can be of service to the next generation so that more people, regardless of their background, have some awareness. And so creating what we didn't have for ourselves so that it can be there for others. But then also just, I asked Chuck about how he uses his time. And it's such a privilege. Like, I believe that people should be paying lots of money to listen to Chuck speak. But he is here, and that is the challenge and the burden of representation. Because sometimes you have to do things and make sacrifices because if not you, then who? And so I'm so grateful to Chuck for being here and just, LA, Los Angeles, that is going to be for an event that is only the second ever Team USA celebration of the Asian American and Pacific Islander community. Only the second time that Team USA has hosted an event to celebrate the contributions of people who are Asian American and Pacific Islander, which is wild. And I can say that because even though we work within the Team USA system, I'm on the Athletes Commission for LA 28, Chuck mentioned it, it's important to be vocal about how even though we have the immense privilege of doing what we love and wearing USA across our chests, that visibility is only one dimension of who we are. And when we're not wearing this gear, how are we treated in the world? And what is that experience like? And then, within the Asian American and Pacific Islander community, the disparity of experience, right? We are, by all intents, privileged. We have a voice. And how do we be mindful of those who don't have the same voice? And how do we advocate for them and their experience?
We have time for one more question.
Hi, I'm Diana. Thank you. Hi.
Hey, Diana.
Hi.
Thank you so much for coming here. I plan to buy the book for my 3-year-old son. And I wanted to ask about your parents and what did they do to encourage you to, pursue something that's kind of different than what many other AAPI parents, I assume, would want their kids to pursue, and letting you go all the way. Maybe not letting you, but how did they support you to get there? What did they do that was kind of different there?
Oh, sure. I could jump first. Well, I mentioned my dad, of course, challenged with identity, but he was a massive sports fan. And so it was he was the one who encouraged me to do it. He drove me all my practice, all my games. So, I always say my parents are my absolute biggest fans, and they've always just supported me to the ends of the earth. And it's really been special to have them, be part of my entire athletic career. And, I think sports is something that my dad and I really bonded over, something we could really share together because, again, this other identity of his had become something that was just, this is not something I associate with at all. So we were able to find other things, and sport really is the way in which we did that. And I think the other cool part is, though, again, with Tokyo, obviously it felt a little tokenish, be like, oh, you're Japanese American, you're going, but it also did allow me to explore and talk more to my grandma, who was in the internment camps during World War II, and really get a chance to learn more about what it was like. Obviously, it was challenging, but there were some positive things. They owned their own business, and they started their own company, and my grandfather actually, after getting released, joined the National Guard, so there's all kinds of really interesting stories and things I was able to learn about my culture. But yeah, my parents have been nothing but supportive of my career, thankfully. They have just, like I said, every single turn said, go for it, go for it, go for it, go for it. Well, okay, go for it.
I love that. I think the core is, and we have a similar experience in terms of our parents' love for us and their belief in our interests and them, I guess, creating the opportunities and giving us the okay, but then their trust that we would take it the rest of the way.
To be completely clear, there was never a plan that we'd end up skating together, skating to begin with, working together. I think the best thing that they did for us was encourage us to be each other's best friend and support system. And then I was very fortunate that when I was 4 years old and I stepped on the ice, I fell in love with the feeling, even though I probably wasn't moving very much. I just loved being on the ice, and they saw that passion and they encouraged me. I never felt any pressure to continue, and I think that's what allowed us to handle some of the most high pressure situations, was that we were fully in control of being in that situation. and they just had unconditional support for us.
Yeah, when Chuck was saying something, I'm going to try to gather my thoughts. I had something that I thought was rather compelling and interesting to say, and I'll see if I can find it. I think that with this book, one of our hopes, we have a lot of hopes, and this book really needs to fill a lot of gaps in our society and generational experience. But the reason why we selected a children's picture book as opposed to a book for an older age group, and it's really nice to see the next generation here as well as people who are older, is because children's picture books are a multi-generational experience. In many cases, a young child opens up a book and maybe they aren't able to read it completely by themselves, and so they're accompanied in that experience by an older sibling or a parent or a teacher, a guardian. And there is an opportunity for interaction and shared learning and then conversation. And conversation, looping back to your question, and communication for people in our community of varying cultural backgrounds. Generational divide is something that happens, that we all experience. No relationship remains consistent throughout the duration. You go through your experience of being a child and looking up to your parents, and then all of a sudden you're a teenager and you want to be as far away from them as possible. But in having more shared conversation, I wonder, you know, for us with our parents and our grandparents, and for Chuck with his parents and his grandparents, if there had been a book like this to be able to see the realm of possibility, but not entirely positive, like the reality and the history. Does that create more open-mindedness and more support within the family structure to be able to encourage people to pursue their dreams and being open-minded to that? Because I think that, you know, while our parents are not immigrants, I have many friends who I've had these conversations with whose parents are immigrants, first or second generation, and the intentionality behind which they guide their children down a particular path, or maybe set up barriers or say like, oh, maybe don't do sports, be a doctor or be a lawyer. That is a conversation that is derived from love and concern and seeking out the security for the next generation. And so, you know, separate from the book being a children's picture book and that multi-generational experience, one thing that I've become more aware of as I've gotten older, and I have this conversation with Maya and with people my age and people older, is that we're all going through this thing for the first time. And so just trying to be more conscientious and thoughtful of the experiences that we all have. And I think that books like this one can hopefully aid that conversation within our community, as well as dispelling harmful stereotypes that exist outside and affect the way that we're treated and perceived.
So again, on behalf of your Ann Arbor District Library, I'd like to thank the Shibutanis and then Chuck Aoki for coming and talking about not only their book, but also their experiences as Olympians, as people getting into this space of discussing Asian American Pacific Islander issues, and for sharing their stories. So again, on behalf of the Ann Arbor District Library, thank you both for, or thank you all three of you for coming. There will be some opportunity for them to autograph if you have a book that you'd like to purchase. Literati is outside, and I think we're going to set up a table outside to give them some place to work from. So if you would like to, again, Literati will be selling books outside, and we'll get them out there and at that table to autograph books in a couple minutes. And again, thank you for coming, and thank you for supporting your Ann Arbor District Library.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you for being here.